Shane, and I'm the president. And we have most of our board here tonight. So I'm going to just make a couple quick announcements. One of the things that we have as a board last week or when we met this month, we as a group decided to donate to the Nevin Weaver Honeybee Excellence Fund. So the Texas Honeybee Education Association is trying to raise. Okay, they're trying to raise 100,000. You want to come up and talk about it real quick? I'm standing here so those are doing. Chris, you have to talk.
Oh, I forgot. Okay, we're good. You can just you need to share that. Is this good enough?
You know how to do that?
Nevin Weaver died some years ago. Nora Weaver, Danny Weaver, Clint Weaver, that you've all heard of, if you don't know personally, are descendants of his. There is a fund at Texas A&M in the name of Nevin Weaver. The capital is not usable, so the capital stays there forever. But the apitherapy department, the beekeeper, why have I forgotten the name?
You know, I still make this big too.
Putting on a Rangel and use the interest from that fund, which Texas A&M says is 4%. So you might want to ask them how to get 4% interest on your own money. But she gets to use that, and it helps her a lot with the graduate students that she has to fund through the summer. So that's why the fund is there. We started it at 155,000 from some years ago. Janice Thomas, that some of you will know, kick-started our fundraising with $25,000, and we wanted to take it up to 250,000. And we're at about 230 at the moment, thanks to a number of people, including our club.
So as a group, we decided to donate $1,500 to the fund. Dr. Rangel does a lot of research, and the fact that she's continuing to learn about how bees can survive and help give us that knowledge, we feel like it's a very worthy. So, but one of the things that it did come up for us is that we have close to $38,000 in our account, which for a nonprofit is quite a lot of money, and we don't want to waste it on purpose. So some of the things that we need to look at are how are we using that money, and part of donating to that scholarship fund was important to us because we want to donate to causes like that because it's in support of our organization. Our job is to educate you guys on how to keep your hives alive, how to deal with varroa mites, and how to survive winter. Go back and donate a little bit more. But said we were donating that amount. But just we wanted to make sure that you were aware of this. They are accepting other donations, but the fact that this does help pay for Dr. Ringel's assistance. Okay. The fact is that okay? The fact that this does help to pay for her assistance and the research, we are all in for that. So we wanted to make everybody aware of how that money is spent. And as a board, we also donate to other causes that are in education. So things like that will come up, and we want to make sure that you're aware of where we're spending the money, because we need to be good stewards of the money that we have in there. In the past, we've always had the queens that go out and do different events, and because of COVID, that's put a halt to that. We also have our scholarship program, and that's something that we're going to reevaluate and make sure that that's working. We did not have the scholarship program, or we didn't have a lot of applicants this time. So we're going to go back and reevaluate that because we feel that the young beekeepers are the best, are the future of our organization. So we want to make sure that that is working, that the kids are learning, and that they maintain that interest in beekeeping. So just that's what happens with our. The other thing that that these plates, the Texas Honeybee Education Association, they do a lot to other clubs to help with their scholarship programs, and so they also have the state of Texas the Texas, and they turn around and donate that money to other organizations. Yeah, something to add.
Just to let everybody, we got $13,000 from the Department of Motor Vehicles for these number plates this year. So that's, what did you tell me, Shirley? About 600 people have so far gotten these plates. And I'm so annoyed because I have a handicap plate. They won't let me have one.
And then if you read the newsletter, and I recommend it, because Jimmy puts a lot of that, but that's where a lot of the information Jonathan Walker out of it's a little north of they his reaching out to him for Saturday or this weekend. So interest, this is a pound of honey. You need to reach out to Jimmy and he will make sure that your honey gets it. And lastly, I think that interesting.
Let's just wanted to start out by saying that I consider this so get over here. Light a little bit. So interrupt me, ask questions, and it doesn't. This is kind of a free for all discussion. I'm going to go over some safety stuff and some just other cool things, and probably talk about what I'm doing this time of year and other stuff. You know, if somebody wants to raise their hand and interrupt and ask, you know, what would they like a Wari hive versus top bar hive versus, you know, flow hive or something like that. Luckily, I don't think the flow hive is as volatile as it was initially. People aren't arguing about it as much as they used to, which is kind of cool. But so yeah, so feel free. I mean, ask whatever, and I'll to the best of my ability try to answer your question. At least what I would do, because that's one thing that I found out in beekeeping is that, you know, there's that whole idiom of like, you know, you ask 5 beekeepers, you're going to get 10 answers is really true. And I have my way of doing stuff, but I'm not dogmatic about it. I mean, I know for a fact that there's other ways. And so, you know, even chime in your way of doing things because I'm always learning. That's the one thing with beekeeping too, is the learning doesn't stop. There's no like level where you get to where you like know everything. And I'm sure Jimmy can back me up on this. I mean, people that have been keeping bees for way longer than I have still get stomped, and the bees do weird things and, you know, throw you for a loop. So I honestly wanted to talk about something really quick. I'm gonna go back here and look at, let's see something here. Let's see if I can go to this really quick. Add this. This is the one I think about. I have something really cool here that I want to share that I think doesn't get done enough. Yeah, it's this. Is that, let's see. Present here. is a little, I had this before, another lecture that I had done before, and I think it's really important, especially for the first year, or even the people that have done it for a long. Yourself is the absolute most powerful tool that you have in your beekeeping. For seriously, I'm not joking when I say that. And the reason why is because you take really how you can see eggs with it, because I even have trouble seeing that, and I have great eyesight. And the big thing too is you can share it with people. Because I can't tell you how many on a forum and seen somebody say, "Oh, you know, I've got queen cells. What do I do? How do I make a split?" When the people immediately jump in with advice of, "Okay, well, you know, you can order queens from here, and you can do this and this in the meantime." And then it turns out that they just had a queen cup, and nobody called it, and the diagnosis was wrong. And therefore, all the advice after was wrong. So having a good diagnosis, and not only that, if you truly have something weird happen, then you can share it with everybody and teach everybody else. So I wanted to talk about this and show you. Really having a frame stand, we already have one of these. They're really awesome. Not only platform. Oh yeah, this is what I want to show you. Here, let me go back. This being, if you try to take pictures of your cell phone, like this, they'll end up blurry. Nobody will see. But if you have this as a stable platform, you put it on here where it's perfectly still. Now you can, you can use both hands. You can get close. You can get far away. You can get your shot. And you'll see, I put up here. There's a stone. It helps in case you've got. There's just something really cool. Right on B school. I get this Texas B really cool thought of that. When I looked at it, I was like, no way, and I put it on working because you probably will have to use this to navigate your phone. And I would suggest practicing with it with your gloves on. You don't have to put your suit on, but just throw your gloves on. And the way to practice is newspaper. And I would put it like, put your frame and see if you can get photos where you can zoom in. If you've got those and you've got really crisp, clear ones, and that way you can work out like the depth of. There's another huge trick with pictures when you're taking pictures of comb. And this totally happened to me by accident, because if somebody would have told me this, I would have been like, there's no way that's true. But the key with it is to turn on your flash, even if you're in broad daylight. And you can see, these are literally the exact same piece of comb. You can see where this bee is in the same part of the picture. This one's without the flash, and this one's the flash. Taking the exact same time. I mean, this is broad daylight. And a lot of times I'll use it if I'm like looking at the comb and maybe there's eggs in there, and you can't tell if the bottom of the cell is shiny or it's actually egg down in there. And this way for sure, because when you do that, then you can go and zoom on your, you can go in there and zoom in with your cell phone and see if you've got eggs or not. And see, little details like are the eggs on the side, like maybe you've got to have started laying workers or something like that. Really powerful tool. Again, turn your flash on. And here's some more you can see with it in the photos. And I've got a couple of these. This one is a little bit hard to tell, but these actually, this is the shiny bottoms of the cell. This wasn't eggs in that one. So, but again, I mean, you can see where the bee and everything is. It's the exact same piece of comb. So, yeah, and then you can like zoom in on the eggs. This is even like a bad cell phone camera has this kind of resolution. If you had anything that's been made in the past like 5 years, that's pretty mind blowing to think that that kind of stuff happens fast. but okay, and this is the last, but I wanted to share that little tidbit about the photography because it really helps. Yes. Okay, cool. Okay, so yeah, that's another great tip too, is using a selfie stick to get in there. I think you have one. Yep. Is to practice with it. And like I say, the newspaper works great as something that then you can zoom in on. And if you can see the actual newsprint grain, then you know you're getting a real high res photo. And just test different methods so that when you go out, I actually talked to a guy at the Brian meeting, and he said he actually has one of those chest mounted GoPros. And so he takes pictures in with his cell phone too for close up stuff. But then for like analyzing the kind of he'll basically come here and go, and then turn his frame around and do that and put it back and just go through them, and then he can go back and watch the video later and kind of get a general overview of what's going on. I mean, we got the technology, why not use it? I mean, that's what I think.
Use your flashlight too.
No, I did. Yep.
Cloudy day or.
Yep, I literally did that the other day because it was kind of cloudy and the sun wasn't in the right spot, and I was like shining my flashlight on my phone in there. That worked great. So yeah, I wanted to share that because it's super powerful. Get back here real quick. Open up my. There we go. Good. Just taking a second to load. And I was saying, I kind of lied to him too, because I said that I wasn't dogmatic. There's only one thing that I will like wave my finger and get like and be like, no, there's a right way of doing it. And that's when it comes to safety. But then you're probably like, wait, this is the guy that like bees all over his face. What is he going to tell me about being safe and protective gear? Well, here's the key. Whenever I do anything with bees, and even this is after years and years of working with bees, I always have this on hand. I recommend too getting like a bin or something to put them in this bin. I always have this in my truck, and I'll show y'all. If I were actually, let's pretend that this is a real hive here that I was working, obviously not in the library, but I would take this bin that has my suit and all my protective gear in it, probably put it over somewhere by the door or in my car. Because if this gets crazy and they start stinging me all over and stuff, you're not going to be able to casually put on a suit right here while you're getting stung in the face. So you'd want to put it somewhere where you can get away from the bees. And honestly, if you're trying to get away from them, weaving back and forth through brush and around things, they lose you. They're not very agile flyers. And I've done that. I mean, I've been in some hives that are just mean, and there'll just be 30 bees, 40 bees, 100 bees on my face trying to sting me through the veil. And I'll go weave through a couple of mesquites or something, like a figure-8 pattern, or kind of just, go around one a couple times and come out the other side and this, that, and the other. And before you know it, when you get, away, there'll be only one or two left. They can't figure out where you are very well weaving through things. So that's one trick you can use. But in this bin, I keep all my stuff. And I've got slides of this that I could show, I guess, for the people that are at home. But I've got all my stuff in here. I've got a few other goodies that I threw in here, but honestly, this is all. I've got my full suit, and I want to stress to especially new beekeepers, things like the tie-down veils, they're great. The jackets, great, but those aren't a first line of defense. If you get into truly hot bees in those, you're going to get stung. They're going to sting you through your jeans. They're going to find little places they can get you under your stomach and other stuff like that. And if you're not wearing, I'm a super big fan of jungle boots, and I brought 2 examples of these with the canvas sides. They work really well because you can do what's called blouse them, where you undo the boot and you shove your suit into the boot, and then you tie your laces around, and essentially you're completely bee proof from the waist up then.
And then, you know, I'll wear gloves and other things like that, and you have your veil and all that. Then you're completely bee proof. You're not going to get stung at all. That's where your kind of baseline of protection is, and you always want to have that on hand. Now, you can totally do like I did and go, you know, do bee beards. Half the time when I'm working in the bee yard, I'll literally do t-shirt, shorts with this thrown over my head. You know, some of the yards I can't even go in though without gloves and stuff. I have to completely suit up, and I know those yards. But the main point being that you want to be able to completely bee proof yourself if you need to. And let's see, I'm going to show you something else. And this is kind of funny, and I bring these, and I'm not honestly making a joke with these, but this is typically my beekeeping outfit when it's hot. I'm serious, because in a ventilated suit like this, you don't have, and I was so stupid for so long, and I don't do what I say, not what I do. I was wearing these with like jeans or shorts or stuff underneath them. No, get some like running shorts or like workout shorts and like a tank top. You really do want to wear at least a shirt though, because I don't know if you've ever like gone to the beach and swam a bunch and you get like sand all over your chest and you get all irritated. This will do that to you if you wear it without a shirt. At least a tank top, but like this is like typically what I wear. It's so much nicer. It's actually bearable to be in one of these suits even when it's hot with that on. And I can't recommend enough like dropping the money and getting a ventilated suit. They really are worth it. I held off for so long not getting a ventilated suit, and then finally when I got one, it was like a totally different game changer. I mean, it really was nice. So I've got those, and then this is another thing, and I'm actually working with a company to try to get these made for beekeepers, but which hopefully I'll be able to have before spring. But I'm a big fan of these heavy nitrile gauntlets. These are truly sting proof. I've reached into the eaves of houses blindly and pulled out honey and comb covered in bees with it, and you will not get stung through these. I've never been stung through them, and they're washable really easily. I've washed these probably dozens of times.
When you get them from?
These I got honestly at the homebrew supply store. If you go to Austin Homebrew Supply, they have them. Homebrew, they make a beer and winemaking equipment. They're down. They used to be on metric, but now they're like on 35. Yeah, they're on 35. They're brewing gloves, is what they are. Yeah. And they work. I worked there for a number of years and would like beekeep in the. I would work there in the winter and then beekeep in the summer and the spring. And these came in and they were brewing gloves. I was like, I bet this would be really good for beekeeping. And this is another thing too. You can quote me on this one. I firmly believe that leather has absolutely no place in the bee yard. And it's not because I'm anti-leather. I actually do leather work and stuff like that. The problem that you run into with leather is that leather will readily take a sting. A bee can sting the leather because it's animal skin. And the bees know that it's animal skin too. They can kind of sense that it's like, you know, flesh of some sort. And they'll sting it. And now everybody knows, you know, bees communicate with pheromones. Now you've got alarm pheromone on your glove, and now you're continuing to handle the bees. You continue to get stings, and I've seen pictures people post where they're just, you know, there'll be hundreds of stings on their gloves. I would have to throw those away because they're so covered in alarm pheromone, they're going to rile up the bees every time you go working with them. You know, of course, you're not getting stung, but it's riling up the bees, and it's causing problem after problem. Yes, sir.
And what do you call those?
They're brewing gloves. Yeah. You know, honestly, if y'all want to. My email's in here too. If anybody wants, you can always shoot me an email, and if you go to Austin Homebrew Supply, is where I get them. Yeah, and you should be able to like try them on there and stuff.
And how often are these taken through the 5 mil latex?
You mean like the gloves that you like use for changing oil and stuff, the little thin ones?
Well, 5 mil.
Right. Yeah, I think these are like 12 or 15 mil or something like that. These are much heavier. Those work great, and that's cool that you brought that up. A lot of people will use, and I've used them before too, the nitrile gloves that, you know, they're like almost like latex gloves that go over your hands. They really don't sting through those too much. However, there's kind of this, like, I guess from doing removals or stuff, there's like this level where you're like, okay, we really got to suit up for this. These bees are not playing around. It's going to be hot. They're going to be mad, and we just got to just deal with it, because there's no, oh, well, if you use a little more smoke, or if you know, hum nicely or talk to them sweet. No, they want your blood and they're mad. those, I would recommend these, but for anything else, if you're ever wanting to do barehanded beekeeping, those gloves work great. And you get the 5 mil, or I think it's a 7 mil too, you can find work really well. I don't know what's going on. Let me make sure my internet's still good. It's not getting like too hot or something. I'll set this out. Yeah, using those gloves works great. And I highly recommend having them. Those are kind of disposable, like you use them and just kind of chunk them. They are a little bit hot and kind of sweaty, but the dexterity that you get from them is just phenomenal. I mean, it really is. Even these are clunky. I mean, I honestly, I work as much as I can barehanded. And once I start getting like 3 or 4 stings in the hands, I'm like, okay, y'all are just mean and mad. And I'm gonna have to put on gloves. But I was gonna say too, one thing that I do when I get stung, and it's something that's funny. I was doing something and someone else was showing a group and I was going through stuff. And I did it so quickly that the person like that had brought the group was like, wait, you know, show them that again, because it's something that I had just done just subconsciously for so long that it just becomes ingrained, or it's like almost like walking. You don't tell somebody, look, we put one foot for the other, and you know, because I did done it so much, was when I get stung, I like immediately, and I do it without even thinking, I'll scrape the stinger out and then turn and immediately smoke it really heavily, and then usually kind of blow some smoke over me. In fact, I do that pretty much when I go into the bee yard. I'll get like really heavy smoke going, but the lid of the smoker open and just kind of like walk through it and let it kind of go over me and kind of waft around a bunch. I think it really helps to kind of cover up your human scent and to kind of make you maybe not as threatening to them or something like that. So, but yeah, this is like my basic setup for stuff. And then it's like, again, feel free if anybody's got any questions on anything, just raise your hand and holler. Another thing that I absolutely love that will help you, because my big fear with this stuff is I'm much more afraid of heat stroke than I am of the bees, because heat stroke will take you down and you're passed out. You know, I can handle stings, or I can get away from them, but the heat stroke, if it gets you and overtakes you, like you can pass out in the middle of your bee yard and nobody's going to find you if you're in a bunch of angry bees. Camelbacks, I mean, we're familiar with these are. They're like with the hydration packs. They work great. You fill them full of ice water before you go out, and then the whole time you're under your veil, just sipping cool ice water. I find it keeps my head a lot clearer. I can think better. Highly, highly recommended. And then another thing I've got as well too. I brought some of these, and y'all are more than welcome to have these if you want. They're Metalite brand. I actually have a slide for this. Let me go show. I have my little thank you, Dad. Here. This stuff, this Metalite, you can order them from Amazon. They're electrolytes, but they have no sugar. It's literally just potassium, magnesium, and calcium. And we used these when I was working cattle out at my mom's ranch when it was like 105 degrees outside, and we were doing stuff all day, and you know, dragging the fields and things like that. And one of the guys that was working there had these. He was like, "Try these; they're amazing." And ever since then, I've been kind of hooked on them. When I go out, I'm sweating like a whole lot because you can't. Sure, Gatorade will rehydrate you, but I find if I drink that much Gatorade, that I'm drinking like way too much sugar and I don't feel good. So I love these, and they're stable too, so you can throw them in the glove box of your truck or whatever. So yes.
I like drip drop.
Okay.
Yes, it does have some sugar. Sugar helps the sick. So
I've since learned that too.
yeah, it really does. And chloride, I think chloride's one of the major.
Okay.
Can you tell me that's for sure?
Yeah, you'll have to let me know, because I'm always looking to try new like hydration stuff. Okay.
Drip drop is the only one people like second.
Pedialyte's good.
And drip drop is better. Walgreens, I see it.
It's really worth it though, because between that and like the cold water and the Camelback, it like keeps you just focused. It makes it not miserable. Another thing too, and I was talking about doing the blousing of the boots, but there's also these things. You can go to Army surplus stores. You can order them online too. They're called boot bands, and those work really well to keep you from getting bees up your pants. And then another thing that I got this year that I absolutely love is Academy. was selling pop-ups, these pop-up things. They were $40. They were like $39.95, and I was like, I mean, at that point, they're almost disposable. And I have 2 of them now, and they're amazing. I've used them. In fact, just recently when I was doing splits, I put one up and backed my truck up into it when I had the tailgate. And I was working off the tailgate. Like, I mean, I had it all set up, and I bring it on in, do the split on the tailgate, and then put everything back in. It was really nice. The whole time I was in the shade.
There are 2 questions.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna bring it up so you can look.
Oh, great, yeah. But yeah, cannot recommend the Easy Apps enough, especially for $40. It's a wonderful thing.
That's all right.
Did I get rid off the Zoom?
No, you're not at all available. It's just how it goes.
Or if somebody can see them, can they read them off to me?
I've got, that's okay.
Yeah.
And then, okay, that's just my solution. So, super to good smoke, and how do you get the camelback in the straw?
How do I keep this straw? It floats around, and half the time it's in my face and other stuff like that, and I gotta kind of grab it weird. But they make and I say Camelback. I'm actually really a big fan of the Osprey brand ones because the Ospreys open at the top and they're much easier to dry out afterwards. But the Osprey brand ones have a little magnet, and there's nothing. I haven't done it to my suit yet, but there's nothing stopping you from mounting that like in your veil somewhere, and then like it clicks to the magnet. And it holds it in place, so it's like out of your way when you're working. In fact, I might have. No, I don't have it on here, but on the other one, it has like a little magnet thing. It's, I guess, what's the secret to good smoke? We try it. I will totally get to that in just a minute. I can show the trick to getting stuff, but because I don't have my smoker with me, it's downstairs. But I want to. Is there a way we could go like? Maybe do that and film it and then post it to like the Williamson County Beekeeper's website or something.
I'll take it.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that because I want to. It's one of those things you really want to see in like first person, because I can. It's like the whole dancing about architecture thing. It's like it doesn't really work. But the main thing is that with the smoke is reliable fuel. I go and just rake oak leaves at my neighbor's house. She lives right next to me. She has a bunch of horses, and she has these huge oak trees, and I go rake the leaves. And I'm a big fan around here of just oak leaves because they're easy to get and they burn nice, they smell good, and they're free. And I take those and rake them. And I got one of these really cool things from Lowe's, I believe, that's like holds the those giant lawn and leaf bags, the big brown ones. It holds those open really well. And so then I just go bring that over, rake up the leaves, I load that full, and then I'll do like 2 or 3 of those bags. And try to do it on a dry day, and then I go and leave those bags full of leaves in my shop, or you can throw them in your garage or wherever. And the main thing is with the lawn and leaf, the brown paper sacks, they dry out, they won't mold. If you put them in plastic or something like that, they can mold, and they just kind of almost get better over time like this. They dry out really, really well. And then when I go to the bee yard, I have a 5-gallon bucket that I fill with those leaves as fuel. And I'm not one of those, like, it's weird with beekeepers and smokers. You always hear this like, oh, well, I loaded up my smoker and I can get it to burn for 27 hours or whatever. Like, I'm not like that. I'm a person that constantly is feeding my smoker. Not constantly, but I'm probably feeding it like every 15 to 30 minutes. I'm like grabbing big handfuls and like shoving it in and keeping it going. And with those oak leaves, they burn completely. You get this really rich, like creamy, nice, like thick smoke and a smolder. And they'll creosote up your over time. Will creosote your smoker up, but that's good. That's what you want. If you're getting creosote in your smoker, you're not burning it too hot. You don't want that in your home wood stove or your chimney, but in a smoker, it's great because that means you've got this like slow smoldering, like smoky kind of fire. And I found a really great way to get rid of the creosote with a torch. So, and I've got videos of that, like I'd love to share with people and kind of show, maybe do a smoker demonstration on, but yeah, that's my main tips. And the other thing is getting it lit. I use newspaper, but I use this weird trick with a newspaper, and I'll show you that when we actually go out and light it. But I might make sure I got everybody's questions.
There's one about feeding, but you can
wait.
Okay, yeah, just holler at me if I'm missing anybody's questions. How do you keep the camera strong? Curious when to start feeding. Depends on where you are if you're asking when to start feeding. Some places are getting a little bit of a goldenrod flow, and we should get a flow with the rain coming through, but I don't know. I mean, the only thing I know is that stuff's unpredictable, and I would say
That's at the bottom.
this is definitely the time to start feeding. It depends on how your hives are doing. You know, I would be looking at them and making sure that they've got plenty of stores. And for most of the bees around here, you can get by with a full bee, at least with 10 frame. I've recently switched to 8 frame. It's a little bit lighter, but I'm assuming that I should be able to get by in an 8 frame as well too, as long as they're like, you know, most of the frames in here are full of honey. At least with the bees that I've run, they seem to be very, very frugal over the winter, but I would always err on the side of feeding too much, as long as you're not pushing to the point where they swarm. Like it'd probably be better to go ahead and feed than not to feed.
Yeah.
Because once we get into like, you know, November, December, starts getting cold, like you can't feed at that point. So, I mean, you can feed dry sugar and other things like that, but it's not the same as having like real liquid feed on them in the appropriate time of year. So, and interesting thing for everybody too, this last season at the UT Beekeeping Club, one of the top bars there, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. They, no kidding, every single cell, every single comb of about, I want to say it was about 15 bars, completely full of honey. There was no brood, there's nothing, it was all solid packed, capped honey. It was wild. And we even were like, well, maybe did the queen die or something wrong? And I was like, wait, hang on, the queen's probably still there. We looked for her, we couldn't find her. And then sure enough, they made it like through the winter, even the crazy freeze. And in the springtime, and the queen was laying like gangbusters, and she had a beautiful pattern and everything like that. So bees can't fill everything. It's probably not the best if they do that, because sometimes they'll swarm if you do that, but they can fill the entire thing up with honey where there's literally nothing else. There's no pollen, no brood, no nothing.
And how much honey was left when winter was over?
When winter was over, there was still a substantial amount left over. They were really frugal about it. I run only feral bees, or like bees that are like the mite-resistant ones from like Beekeeper. And so they're pretty phenomenal about how they can winter over. I've seen like late removals that I've done where I've done like a cutout or something like really late in the year when it was pushing into winter, and they went into winter without very much stores, and they still pull through. So I don't know what it is about the feral genetics. They seem to be able to survive on stuff like that. I guess because it's selection. I guess something like an Italian strain out there that it's like that's rearing brood based on daylight. It's gonna, and in this type of situation, if they're just out in the wild, it's gonna consume their stores up and kind of get out of the gene pool, because they're gonna just blaze through their stores. They're notorious for that. So if nothing against Italians, if you go after them, you really gotta watch that early spring, because they can totally starve. They can like build up too much and not put enough back and leave enough in reserve and just start out. So cool. Let's see what else I got in here.
Go ahead. You may have to click it back over.
Oh,
Just move it. And then I'll let you know when the new questions come in.
There we go. Another thing too, that's kind of, if you're for a safety thing that I talked to people about too, it's not as much for people that are rural as more people that are kind of in suburban type areas or urban areas, is having somebody that's got an out yard that like now before your bees get mean or something like that, because pretty much everybody here at some point in time is probably going to have a mean hive, and it's just kind of the way it goes. And having someone that that's a fellow beekeeper that you meet at the club or something that has an apiary that's kind of out in the country, out of the way of people and livestock, that if you get a really mean hive that you can't requeen where you're at, because when you requeen a mean hive, they get extra mean, they go crazy when it happens, because you usually make splits. At least I do. I always split really mean hives. It calms them down a lot faster, but they still get mean in the process. And if you're in a residential neighborhood, that's not a good idea. So you would want to move them to an out yard. So finding somebody that you can get that has an out yard that you can move them to is just a cool thing to have in your back pocket. And I can talk about moving bees if I want to. Just like I say, if you've got, I brought something kind of cool to show. which is this. I wanted to show you, this is how I make moving screens. So it's really simple and it works great. So first off, this is number, I forget what number it is. It's like number, is it number 8?
That's what we're talking
Yeah. It's you say me again. It's number 8 mesh, but it's 1/8 inch hardware mesh. And just make sure, because if you go to like Home Depot or somewhere, they carry 1/4 inch a lot, and it won't 1/4 inch won't work, but these will go right through the 1/4 inch. But this 1/8 inch stuff works great. And typically like an Ace Hardware or your more rural hardware stores are going to have this stuff, usually in a roll somewhere in the back, and you can get it by the foot or you can buy an entire roll. It's really great stuff for bees, for making screens. And it's bigger holes, so it's more ventilation than like window screen, but it's heavier duty too. It's more like puncture resistant stuff. And the way that I make moving screens, if I've got to move bees at night, and I'll tell you this too, and this is one that I honestly did recently, and I'm embarrassed to even say this. When you move bees, use moving screens. I didn't, and I moved a bunch of mean hives, and when I got to where I was going, the entire back of the trailer was just full of bees. I mean, there was clumps of them on the sides of the trailer. They were all over the hives. I mean, they were everywhere. Like, you really do want to confine them when you drive with them. Like, I thought, oh, I can, get away with it this time, and I'll just, blah, blah, blah. And no, it was a mess, and I really regretted doing it. So again, don't learn from my mistakes, and always use screens. But I just have a scrap of that here, and the way that I make them is super easy. You just cut yourself a strip. I'm going to kind of square up these ends because it's kind of a little wacky. But might have to make a double one of these. But you just take yourself a strip like this big. Cut it about there. It's just like an oblong rectangle. It helps if you can get a really long strip. I don't have one, but that's okay, because what I'm going to do is just cut 2 strips. And it doesn't even really matter. Like, you don't want to make them super, super thick, but like, that's good. Just 2 simple rectangles. And then what you do is you fold them in the middle all the way over. So, all the way flat. You can push something down on it if you want to get them kind of nice. You want a really good kind of crisp crease in it if you can help it. And then this one too. And these will work with pretty much any style entrance. In fact, they probably even would work with top bar hives and stuff, as long as you have a slit, like a thin type entrance in the front. With the round ones, you're better off probably just putting a piece of screen and nailing it on there.
So that width now is just wider than the basic opening?
Oh, I'll show you. There's a trick to it. I'm not done making these yet. I'm going to pop this open. So this works really, really well. Because here's the thing. Every single one of your entrances is a little bigger or a little smaller. And if it's more than 1/8 of an inch, you're going to have bees coming out of it, and it won't truly hold, which isn't the end of the world, but it's not ideal. And so now, let me put this guy down here. This up here. I want to show you how to use it. So here's the key. What you do. So I got these 2, each entrance screen have 2 pieces. And so I would come in this entrance, and I can see, I'll start, push that one into that side, push this one into this side. Here, this is actually, this one into this side, and this one over here. So there, this one is touching this side, and this one is touching this side, right? It's in the very corner, so it blocks the bees out. And before you do this, it helps to smoke a bunch. And wait a while, be kind of patient. It takes a while for them to move in, back in usually. But this side's pushing this, and then you just push the 2 together, and you take them out. Now this is exactly the width of the front, and I push them together. And then typically we'll push this in here, and then use my, I think it's actually in the car. I use my hive tool to push these in the front.
The folds on the inside.
Yeah, the folds on the inside, and if it's not wide enough for the how tall your entrance is, just spread it open a little bit. And if you find that it's like really shut in there and it's like not holding right, make the entrance ones that are a little bit wider when you fold them. And this works great. And then typically what I do then when I get them to where I've moved them to, or you need to pull the screen out, I'll come with a pair of needle nose pliers and just grab right here in the middle and just pull out. And both of them will pop right out. It's kind of hard to grab with your hands, and with the pliers, you just pop them right out.
Yeah.
So if you're getting the close, I'm showing. I put this to this side and this to this side, and you can kind of eyeball how wide you need to be, and then you push these together, and it makes an entrance screen. It's like perfectly fit to this width because, like I say, even if you're ordering from, a good reputable supplier, your entrances are going to vary a little bit, and this way it helps. And then the only other thing that you need to do would be, if you're moving these, especially it's kind of warm, is to like put some screen over the inner cover. If you wanted to do that, would be kind of cool to give them a little bit more ventilation. But I honestly find that this is plenty because you're going to be moving bees at night anyway. I would never try to move bees in the blazing sun. If you do, either move them really early in the morning or after dark. Just because you leave them cooped up like that in the back of the truck or something like that is a really bad idea. You always want to treat nooks and packages and hives of bees like you would a puppy. Like, don't leave them in a hot car. Don't leave them in the hotbed of a truck. Like, keep them shaded if you can. Keep good ventilation and stuff on them. They absolutely will. Yeah, and it's kind of sad too because a lot of times when they do that, they'll come out wet because they kind of they empty out their stomachs and they end up in this kind of sticky puddle. It's really sad. So if you do move a bunch of bees and you open the screen and a bunch of sticky looking bees come out, you got them way too hot, and that might have killed the queen. I definitely would keep an eye on that colony because it's prone to get robbed out and everything else too. So, but yeah, and these are some good guidelines to go through when you move bees at night. And always suit up too, because when you move them at night, the last thing you want to do is drop them. They'll crawl on you at night. They don't fly at night so much as they crawl more like ants. So you'll get them crawling all over your suit and everything like that. Another thing too that I always have, this is critical. I don't know if anyone know this about wearing a red headlamp. With bees obviously fly for white stuff. If you've ever, I do a lot of removals. And it's really common for somebody to have bees in a tree or in their backyard and they have a bright back porch light and they'll end up with hundreds of bees on their porch every night because of that, because bees will fly for the white light. But they don't actually see very well in the red spectrum of things. They can see in ultraviolet. That's another thing. You ought to look up something crazy. Go Google ultraviolet flower photography. That will blow your mind. There's patterns in flowers that you've looked at your entire life that you can't see because you can't see the ultraviolet colors, so to speak. Wild. Bees can, but you can't. But as a result, their vision is kind of pushed to the ultraviolet. They can't see the red spectrum of things as well. So if you wear a red headlamp at night when you're working around in the bee yard, they're much less likely to fly for your face or for the light. And this is kind of, the rest of this stuff is kind of normal stuff, like putting a bunch of ratchet straps. If you're worried about it, double it up. If you've got a big colony, put 2 ratchet straps on it. Those ratcheting tie down. I also brought a hive bag here somewhere. I don't use these that much. If you're transporting bees in a car and you're really nervous about it, you can use a hive bag where you put the hive in this. It helps. And I also got the hive carrier. I think up here too somewhere.
Last focus again.
But it's it's these guys, but it's just kind of basic stuff. So. The main thing though is honestly though, to tell you the truth, is having a really clear plan. And I'm serious, it sounds silly, but even okay, and talking with the person that's going to help you move them, I'm okay, we're going to lift it, we're going to walk down this path, we're going to go, and my truck's parked there, really watch, because when you're moving, I still remember to this day, I helped a guy move that was the crazy story. I think y'all probably heard me tell the time that guy moved a bunch of hives, didn't do it right, moved in the middle of the day, did weird stuff poured Coca-Cola on them, thinking it was going to calm them down, all this stuff. The bees were furious. When I showed up to help, it was 2 fire trucks, police, code enforcement, and news were all there. It was pretty crazy. And so, but I still remember, I remember that firefighter looking at me and son, you can't move these bees by the end of the night, we're gonna have to kill them. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, I'll help you move the bees. And we moved them off to a friend's farm, but when we were moving, I remember picking up this big, it was like a triple deep, and we were moving it, and I tripped and fell, and it hit me in the head really hard. And luckily the hive didn't bust open, but I mean, you gotta be really, really careful. And if you have like big stuff, I definitely would use like a carrier like this or something. You know, single deeps and double deeps, even you kind of get away if you've been like lifting some weights, but heavier than that, like I would try to either not move them or do something else or use a carrier. Another random bit too, I'm really big on using, I don't use a bee brush ever, I just use handfuls of grass. To me, it works the best. If it gets dirty or you're worried about transmitting disease between colonies, you can just chunk it on the ground and grab another one. If for some reason the bees don't seem to get aggravated by it, I don't know why. It really like that you can get it out of town and just almost like whacking them like off the combs, and they don't. I mean, I'm never that mean, but I'm just saying like you can get you can get in there and get them off, and they don't seem to get mad for some reason. Something about the grass, like they don't perceive it as like a threat. It's really weird. And this, I do want to talk about this because this is actually what I'm doing right now. I'm making splits, and I'm probably about to make the last splits of the season because I think weavers and a lot of the queen breeders are kind of making their last calls. Like, okay, these are kind of last queens they're going to get before spring. And this, if you said it on my my swarm prevention lecture, didn't you? Or just okay, yeah. And you've heard this. Forgive me, but I was talking about this this method that I do of splitting hives is another really good way to also deal with aggressive colonies, because if you have a really aggressive hive and you go into them and you're trying to like find the queen to replace her stuff, it's almost impossible because they're mad, they're running all over the place. You're kind of frazzled because there's bees all in your face. I mean, I still get kind of frazzled when I've got a really aggressive hive. It breaks your concentration. You know, bees are running every which way, and you're kind of like, how in the world am I going to try to find the needle in the haystack in here and take out this queen? And my solution is always to divide. And the way that I do it, I'll show you real quick. And this works, and this is different than just, you know, your traditional split in a hive is going to be, you know, like, oh, you balance out the brood and the honey, and you know, just kind of casually put everything down. That works really well with calm bees. But when you've got ones that are aggressive and they're running around, what you'll end up happening is you'll do a split, and then you'll come back the next day and you'll have a bunch of bees in one box and nothing in the other one, because they were freaking out and you probably didn't get enough of one and the other or stuff. And so what I do with these is really just an artificial swarm. And I find that works really well for splitting like aggressive colonies. So like, let's say that this is an aggressive colony here, and this is just an empty box, right? So these are really mean. This is just a box that I brought to split them into. What I do is, first I'll take this, and now I would take these and I would get in here and I'd split them in half, roughly, and look at, you know, I do try to balance out the kind of, you don't want to put just like all honey in one box and all like brood in the other. You do want to kind of balance the two out. But the key being, oh, another thing I totally forgot to mention beforehand, which I had right here. This is another thing that I feel kind of dumb about, that I like have kept bees for years and years and years without ever doing this, and I recently did it, and it's like a total game changer. And these are real simple things. This is a Write in the Rain notepad. It's waterproof paper. And there's a pencil, a mechanical pencil. And you ask, well, why are you using a pencil and not a pen? Mechanical pencil won't fade in sunlight. Pen and ink can fade over time, but the pencil won't fade. And then these are just thumbtacks, but you can use push pens or thumbtacks. And it's the simplest thing. You're just coming in. I actually got one on here of just when you're doing a split. I always do this now. I write, you know, Hive A, you know, and I'll put like, you know, the mother or the original. I'll put that on there. And so I know, and then the other one, and I'll put it on the front so that I can see them. and then do the exact same thing on the other one. I'll put it here and write. Well, these are great too, because you can also take notes when you're in the bee yard really easily. But I'll put, Hive Bag, and I'll put the daughter, or whatever works for you, and label both of these. And I can't tell you how many times this is like saved, especially if you're doing multiple splits. I mean, this really helps out to label them. And I just started doing it in general in the bee yard for like inspections. The last time I was there, hey, this hive has something weird. I mean, it's like a Post-it note for a beehive. You just slap it on the front. The bees don't care. It can handle being in the rain. I mean, if you're in a lot of wind, you might want to put like 2 thumbtacks in it to hold it down. Works phenomenal. And then the beautiful thing is if that fills up or it's not what you want or whatever, you just make another one and put it on there. But I labeled them first before I do this. And this also honestly works for doing splits. It works for aggressive hives, for recleaning, and it also works in case you have a swarm. All of these things it works for, which is kind of cool. So again, this is the parent colony, and this is an empty box in this scenario. What I would do is go through here and I'd pretend these are empty. I'd take some of these out, of course, and I'd go through here. Now you want some honey and some brood in each side, at least 1 frame of brood on either side, and the rest is honey. Because if you're working this and they're really angry and stuff and they're flying around, you might want to kind of try to get in there and get out. But here's the key. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. We're in here. That's 8. And then this one, and then I would, again, this is empty. I would put the empties of this one back into here. Okay, but before I do this, I would go and every single one of these frames from the parent colony, brush them off into here. Or if you don't have queen cells, if you're doing this as a split, because you've got queen cells in here, you don't want to ever shake queen cells because you can dislodge the larva and the queen cell then won't. Well, the larva won't be able to develop and die because they get separated from the royal jelly. But I would come through here and use a brush and brush every single bee off into this one, right? Every single one off into here, every single one. And I mean, at the end of it, there shouldn't be anything in this box. If you know how to queen spot, and you can look through and you go, okay, there's like 20, 30 bees in there, but I don't see any queens anymore. I know the queen's not in there. You can sign off on that she's not in there anymore, then you're good. But even at the point of like, it's not a bad idea to have like an extra box and like move these frames out, like brush them off into here. Mind you, this is where you're going into, and this had brood and stuff in it in here. You moved it over here. Every single bee gets brushed off into this box. When you're done, you want this box to be like as empty as you can get it. Then what you do is that you can take this, and I would personally move it somewhere. Like, I don't like setting them right beside each other. You can do that, but I don't know. I'll either take these to a different yard or move them like over here, and we'll move this one over here in the yard. There we go. I think we lost the Zoom. Thank you. So what I've done is basically just duplicated a swarm. Mind you, you're like, but wait, you just left a box of empty bees. But yeah, but this was the original location where the hive was. And every single one of the field force that leaves that box, that's the foragers, are going to come back here because this is home. They won't stay in that box. But all of the young bees and the queen won't leave that box, and they'll stay in there. And so now you've effectively sort of balanced them. You faked a swarm essentially, because when a colony swarms, the old queen leaves with about 3/4 of the workers, most of which are young bees that haven't been foragers. They leave and go try to set up shop someplace else. Meanwhile, you've left behind the queen cells, which in this case we don't have them because we're just making a split because these bees are mean. But we've left the field force will come back here and they stay here, which is the way that a swarm usually works. It's a really good way of balancing it because I've tried doing divides before in mean hives, and the bees are running every which way, and you think you get enough in one box, but they fly right out, and they go in the other box, and it's really difficult to balance them. This worked phenomenally. Really, really good success with it. Then my next step is so the next step after that is that this is queenless. I let them sit queenless overnight, and the next day I come back with a queen, and I'll put her in there with a cage. and put her in between two frames and in the middle of the brood nest and leave her caged. I don't pull out the corks. I don't do anything like that. I leave her in there overnight, and I come back the next day. This gets labor intensive because you're constantly going back. This is why if you're doing splits or requeening, it helps to, I take some to my home yard and do them there. It helps, the ones that are queenless. And so the next day I come back and I'll pull that box out. And this is something you have to have somebody kind of show you in a bee yard of what the bees act like on an accepted queen versus when they don't accept. And to put it in a nutshell, probably the best way to describe it, if they don't like her, you hardly can't get them off the screen. They grab and they bite and they want to sting her and they're mad and you can't brush them out of the way. If you come there with a finger and just very gently just move the bees and they move out of your way, more than likely they're pretty cool with the queen. And then, what?
I'm low.
Oh, really? Okay.
Low when they leave, then they.
If you don't, then you know, that's
If there's
great.
still bites
That's
on
cool.
it, then don't unplug it yet.
Yeah, so Jody was saying she blows on them, so that's awesome. And if they run, then it's good. If they stay stuck on that cage, then you know. And at that point, you can let them maybe sit a little bit longer. There's a really other dirty trick that I'm going to tell you in a minute that you can do with it that works too. But then at that point, I'll take that queen cage and I'll pull the cork out and hold my finger up on the hole and I'll set it down on top of the frames with the top open and just wait. And a lot of times I'll come with a little gentle puff of smoke and you watch the queen will run out, she'll go down in the frames, and then I take the cage out and I know she made it out okay. And then effectively then I come back. You'll have to come back again though, wait a few days, come back again, check for eggs. But another thing you really have to check for is queen cells. Because in the meantime, some of the bees that were there when they were queenless might have been like, all right, let's make queen cells. And it's crazy how fast they can start emergency queen cups. I've seen them do it in like less than 24 hours. They'll have these drawn out and you're like, okay. And sometimes even if you put a queen in there, they'll still keep making the queen cells. And what happens when that queen hatches out? I don't know. Do they fight? Do they swarm? But it's like, you're better off going in there really meticulously. But it's kind of cool because you've only got 5 frames that you've got to go through to go and just meticulously look over and get all the bees off of them and look, make sure you don't have any queen cells in them and take those out. And at that point, you've effectively queened them. Now onto this box, because they're still mean, and this box is still full of mean bees. If I need to stay in camera, I can stay over here. This box, now you've only got 5 frames to go through to search for the queen for this one, right? And it's a lot easier to do, and you can usually go through and find her because you know she was in here. Because you know when you left this box it was empty. So she's definitely in that box. So sorting through 5 frames, you can usually find her. And you basically repeat that process. You catch that queen, take her out, let them sit queenless, and then repeat that whole process over. But if you want to do a really low down dirty trick, and this actually works, but it's kind of dirty, you take the old queen and you smash her and you rub her on the cage, and their pheromones mix, and they're much more likely to accept the new queen that you put in there. And if it's a queen that I'm already going to take out her genetic line because they're ferocious and they won't calm down no matter what I do, I do that a lot of times. Or the other thing you can do is you can kill her and throw her in some alcohol and use her as a queen lure for swarm traps, which you use lemongrass too. I had a friend, my friend Anna Geselman, that does BMR jewelry. She used to make these amazing pendants. She would cast the queens in resin and then make these like art pieces out of them. It was really cool. So I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do with the mean queens, but yeah, that's a low down dirty trick, but it works to squish them and rub them on the cage. And then you repeat that process with this one, and effectively the mean bees are gone. And you'd be surprised that when it's been divided, how calm. Like I just went to a bee yard just the other day. I mean, they were mean bees. And did the split, and I'm back there now. I can't work without a suit, but I can work without gloves now, and I don't get stung in the hands. So it will calm them down. And now I've got 2 really strong splits out of that with good lineages because I replaced them both with known queens. So it's a really good way to deal with swarm cells if you get them. It's a really good way to deal with aggressive colonies. And it's a really good way to just like splits in general, I find. If you have super calm bees, you can do that thing where you just, split off the stuff and the bees aren't flying off the combs. But in my experience, it's usually the strong, healthy ones are the kind of crazy mean ones. And I tend to split those up that way. So anybody got any questions on the process or anything? Or yes, sir?
So even when you take that queen and put it out, shows up. After the alcohol goes off, she still has strong.
Oh, well, you actually leave her like sealed up in there. Typically what I'll do is catch her in a cage and I'll toss her in the freezer to kill her. Cause I don't know, I feel weird dunking her in alcohol to kill her. It just seems kind of mean. The freezer kind of just puts her to sleep and she's gone. And yeah, I mean, sometimes I just throw her like alive and alcohol to burn up. It seems kind of mean. So I'll take her then after that and you can stick her in like an eyedropper bottle with like a rubbing alcohol or Everclear or something like that, and you just leave her in there. And then you use the eyedropper when you're baiting swarm traps. Like you would bait with like 2 drops of lemongrass oil and like 1 or 2 drops of that queen lure on like a Q-tip and throw it in the entrance, like, and you can keep them baited that way regularly. That's another trick if you're doing swarm traps to bait them. I'll use a Q-tip. You just drop the stuff on the thing and throw it in the front. It's an easy way to keep them. You know, otherwise you have to take them down, take the lid off, drop your drops in there, and put the lid back on. And no, I don't want to do any of that. So, but yeah, I find this works great. And another thing, and I said this in my other lecture that I was at the Bryan School. So really important to keep extra woodenware on the hand and keep it like. I had a guy that I helped do some splits, and he got queens and was panicking because he needed more woodenware, and he was looking around, and he had all 8-frame stuff, and the only woodenware he could get was 10 frame. So now he's got half this and half that. It's woodenware, and it's just get some extra boxes, a couple of extra, and just kind of always have them on hand because you never know. Like if you have queen cells and you need to make a split, or one of your hive gets mean, and you need to make a split, you can requeen them, and then you might not make as much money that year, but you could definitely sell off a hive or a nook and recoup the expenses or upgrade your equipment, or, you know, or just have some more hives if you want, you know. So it's don't be afraid to split them if you need. And yeah, this is like a list of stuff for any, especially for new beekeepers, the stuff that bees really hate. That you want to make any colony mad, even nice bees, take a deep breath and blow in the front of the hive. They hate that. They really get mad. So, I'm trying to think what else. Oh, there's another thing too, a little tidbit of trick. I have a real scythe I got from Scythe Supply, and they're awesome for cutting weeds around the bee yard. And then I also have one of these that I keep in my beekeeping toolbox. You can get these at like Asian grocery stores. Like I think probably H Mart will have them, or trying to think where else. Like any of the larger Asian grocery stores in Austin carry these things. And they're awesome for cutting the weeds in front of your hive. Because not only do you not have to fire up the weed eater, these don't make the bees mad. They won't, if you go there and cut your weeds and stuff with them, they won't get angry. Just be careful they don't cut your hand. But they work great for that. I use them for trimming up all around my bee yard. This one I'll cut like big stuff with if I need to get in and like clear an area. These work great on ragweed too. They'll cut as long as it's not super crazy thick ragweed. So
Does that blade fold in?
No, it stays straight. Yeah, this is a European side. The American sides are known for being kind of like a backbreaker, like so to speak. But this one's not bad at all. You just slide it on the ground and it's just, and it cuts. The higher and thicker the grass, it actually cuts it better than really thin stuff. But you know, they're not. Ordering one of these wasn't super cheap. It was probably about as much as it would for like a cheaper gas weed eater. But I mean, it'll last as long as my grandkids' kind of thing. I mean, and still work just as good. So
Home Depot carries a sling blade.
okay,
It's
the one you kind of swing like golf swing.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's got a short handle on it, and it's pretty cheap. I mean, it's that cyst is a lot nicer.
yeah.
But just the sling blade that'll cut briars and grass and stuff like that, it works pretty good.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you're saying you can get the sling blades from Home Depot. These guys are on the cheap side. Like you can get one of these for, I mean, I've seen them from anywhere from a couple of dollars to maybe like 10 or 15 bucks. They're pretty cheap. And I found, I don't have it with me, unfortunately, I apologize, but there's a company called, you can get them off of Amazon. It's called Easy Lap. And they make this round little brass diamond sharpener that folds in on itself, and I use it for sharpening this, and it's round. I mean, you can do knives and other stuff with it too, but I keep that in my beekeeping box with it, and I'll run it over it real quick and get it like really sharp, and then go out and cut. You know, in some of my out yards that are out in like Taylor and stuff, they're out in the middle of the field and the grass is this high. You know, I'll go there and trim around the hives to clear the entrances so the bees can come and go. Super fast, easy. And it's way easier than trying to carry gas and oil and all the stuff to start up a weed eater or something at the bee yard. So, but I'm trying to think what else. Y'all got any more questions or something? Or if it's free for all, yes.
You're talking about how to your smoker, what you put your smoker.
Ooh, and that's another really good point
Repeat your question.
for safety. What?
Repeat your question.
So the question was, what do I put my smoker in? I found a mortar container from an Army surplus store ages ago, and I've never found another one since. And it's about this tall. I'll show it to you when we go do a smoker demo outside later. It's about yay tall, about yay wide, and they're airtight. And you can put your smoker in it and shut it, and it shuts off the air supply to it. It smothers it. Two Hives Honey, I believe Terra has some for sale that are aluminum. Maxant Honey Company sells, oh, you have to buy them online. They sell like a stainless steel version of it. It's really nice, but it's about $100. But in my opinion, it's worth it because it's something that snuffs out the smoker like great, and you can throw it in the back of the truck. I mean, it's truly, truly airtight. There's like no leakage on it.
Walter Kelly had one.
Okay, Kelly as well. This guy right here was telling me he was using a 5 gallon, or it was a 5 gallon trash can that he got, or 6 gallon trash can that he got from Tractor Supply that worked really well. And if you're looking for an ammo can that will fit a smoker, it's kind of compact, so I wouldn't store your smoker in it all the time because it compresses the bellows. At least with my date ounce smokers, it does. I'm a real big fan of the date ounce smokers. They're made in the States, they're stainless, they just work really well. I've used them for years and years during removals, dropped them off ladders, they've fallen out of the back of the truck, they've been kicked, thrown, like, I mean, they've gotten everything you've possibly done to them, you know. Bushels and bushels worth of leaves burned through them, and they're still rocking. I still have my original smoker from when I started keeping bees. I since retired it, but I still have it, and it still works fine. But the trick with it, if you go to an Army surplus store, you might have to call around. Ask for a saw box, and it's SAW. It stands for Squad Automatic Weapon, but it's like that's what my brother carried from the Army. But it's a saw box. And you got to tell them, like, not a 50 cal can, because a 50 cal can is a little bit smaller and it won't fit a smoker, but a saw box is just big enough that it'll fit like a standard size smoker in. And like I said, it squishes the bellows when you put it in, but it will put it out as well too. And it's a much more compact box that you can use to transport your smoker. It works great. Again, it's SAW box. In any Army surplus store that's worth their salt, you call them and say, hey, do you have any saw boxes? So they also might have some other odd, large size of ammo containers. They work great for that, and they're pretty durable. And I've had the same one for probably 20 years.
Popcorn tins work.
Popcorn tins work as well too. Basically, any metal container that's like pretty airtight, you can throw your smoker in and put it out. Because I never could get the corks to work and stuff. They still would burn for a long time afterwards and stuff. If you got your smoker lit right, put a cork in the end, it's probably still burn for a while. So yeah, anybody?
You have any trouble with wax spots?
As you like see all the wax spots fly with this? Not wax spots. Yeah, it's stuff that's like I've stored that doesn't have bees in it. Yeah, but in any of my colonies, no, except if something's wrong with the colony and something. Wax moths are like vultures. They only move in after the colony is either so weak that it's just pretty much dead or it does die out, and then the wax moths move in force. Small hive beetles are a little bit different. They'll move in if there's not enough bees to kind of keep them in check, but they don't actually prey on the bees. They'll just get in and slime the honey and make the hive where the bees don't want to be there anymore. And anybody here that runs top bars, be really careful. I broke a comb one time in one of my top bars, and I thought, oh, no big deal. I'll just lay it down in the back, and the bees will clean it out, which is what normally happens, right? But the small hive beetles are kind of high at that time of year, and it's hot out, and they can get underneath that comb where the bees couldn't get to. And the next thing I know, like several days, I turn around and like this goo's kind of dripping out the entrance. And I'm like, oh no. And they had got in there and like slimed the whole thing because they were able to hide in there enough to proliferate. So they kind of overran the bees that were in there. So now whenever I do anything with like top bars, I'll make sure and prop. If I break a comb, I'll put it in the back, but I'll prop it up to where the bees can get all the way around it. But in my experience, top bar hives work a lot better with wax moths because there's not as many places in a top bar, a well-made top bar hive that the wax moths can, or excuse me, the small hive beetles. I said wax moths, but small hive beetles can hide. And typically when I open my top bars, all of the hive beetles at the very back end of it, and it's just a smash fest. And I squash them all, and then I don't see any of the brood nest anywhere else because they kind of can't, the way top bars are constructed, they kind of can't hide. Whereas, the frames on here create all, especially when they get kind of propolised up, all in here are these little nooks and crannies and little places that they can kind of hide. So, sorry, you were talking about wax moths, but that was kind of small hive beetles. And to me, they're kind of like both similar pests that they're kind of, they take upon advantageous things in a hive rather than like varroa where they're actively preying on the larvae and stuff. So, but anybody else got any questions or anything cool going on in your bee yards or yes?
Can you talk a little bit about seeing your hives this time of year?
Yeah, what you be seeing in your hives this time of year, hopefully a goldenrod flow or the snow on the mountain, snow on the prairie. Yeah, broomweed. I'm trying to think what else would be blooming right now. Mainly like goldenrods, like some fall asters. Sometimes you get those like basket flowers and stuff. If you ever get a chance, they look like almost like a big thistle, this kind of big pom-pom thing, and the middle part of them, and they have this wonderful smell to it. If you ever see, I've seen a few on the road at 971. I live on 971, and I've seen a few on the road there every once in a while. But those are pretty rare and far between. The main thing you're gonna see is goldenrods. Everybody here know how to ID goldenrod? It looks like a yellow feather duster, like you like dust. It's just this boom of like yellow. And it's kind of triangular, and you'll just see fields of it, and it's weird. Like once you start IDing flowers, you'll see lots of stuff. In fact, it's weird. This year I didn't see either one. Usually on the 130 corridor down, like right about pretty much from like Georgetown, Hutto, down to like when you get into like Austin, would just be nothing but like horsenet growing, and then it'd be like nothing but goldenrod. Like, but this year I didn't really see anything I either one. It's weird. Freeze did strange things. But seeing a flow right now, seeing pollen and stuff coming in. I mean, and if you're not seeing that, if your hives are kind of looking bare, or you've noticed that they've contracted the brood nest and they're not filling stuff in with nectar and things like that. I mean, I would probably start feeding. It can't really hurt, unless you're trying to produce a fall honey crop. But if you're doing that, then stuff would be kind of set up different anyway. But you should start to see too as the fall goes on. This really is apparent in top bar hives because you can. I'm a big top bar hive fan, but I don't hate on link straws. I have a bunch of link straws and I run them, but visually, it's much easier in a top bar hive to see the brood nest contract. And by contract, I mean the queen lays in a smaller and smaller area, and there's more empty comb, or they fill it back in with the fall flow honey and cap it off. But the brood nest inside of the combs, like you would see, like kind of expand in the springtime, and then it starts to contract back down in the fall. And I've had some colonies that like I thought they were dying or something because they had like a bunch of honey and everything, but like they literally would get down to like one frame with bees on it, and that's what they wanted to do. They contracted it down, and they'll winter over with that because they don't need a bunch of bees in the winter to do anything. They just need enough bees to keep the lights on and kind of keep stuff going, keep the cluster warm, and not a bunch of extra hungry mouths to feed. And then they'll blow up in the springtime and just fill the whole thing up, and you'll start seeing space clear out. Does anybody here run top bars? You got to. One trick that I use with top bars is thumbtacks. And I take the thumbtacks and stick them in the ends of the bars so that I know exactly how wide the brood nest was. I know exactly how wide the honey stores were. If I get a cross comb, I'll mark it with one so that I know to like treat those. That's like one thing. But it's really easy because you'll go in there and it's so easy to see. You'll go in there the next time and you'll go, this was where the brood nest was the last time. It was from this dot to this dot, and it was full of brood. And now half of that's gone. They're like moving down, which is normal. It's nothing to panic at. You'll see it in your Langstroth, but you'd have to have like a record. I'm trying to work on something where I end up with a thing where you can put some like thumbtacks at the back of the Langstroth to be able to ID what was going on inside of it, where you can do the similar thing. You could do that as well. Or like write down in your journal or something, you know, however many that there were, and you'll come back and you can see that they've started to shrink it down. So that's what I would be looking for. And that should start, again, it depends on where you are, but they'll start toning stuff down here in like late October, November, it really starts. And then by December, I don't pretty much, unless something weird's going on and we have a really warm December, like I pretty much at the end of November call it quits, and I don't really do anything until usually like March, because February is such a February. Y'all know, I mean, I still wonder if it's a dream, the whole like weird freeze that we had. But you know, there was warm weather before that. It was like, oh, okay, well, it's not that bad. And then you get the, you know, especially if you're new, I really advise against doing any kind of manipulations until really about April, because we're not out of getting a cold snap until really about April, until about Easter time. And even then, I can't tell you how many years where we've had crazy cold Easters, you know, so watch out with that kind of stuff. So anyway, it's kind of a long answer to a short question, but anybody got anything else they want to, they're stumped about or
Is
anything?
there any other questions on Zoom?
Nothing there.
Nothing on Zoom? Okay. Cool. Well, if y'all want, I don't know if it's raining outside, but we can go out if y'all want. Is it still raining?
Yeah.
Or did it just, okay.
Okay, well, we had one question come in.
Do you have a video?
No, I don't. I was hoping to be able to show everybody, and maybe I'll have to figure out some time to come back or something and bring that. The key being, and I'll show you this again, a lot of it really has to be shown, but the key is with newspaper. I always use the Austin Chronicle to light my smoker because it's free, it's easy. And I ripped it spine downward though, and then tear the pieces up and shred it up into like a nest. One of the big things that people do wrong when they try to light a smoker is grab newspaper, wad it into a ball and shove it down. There's no airflow through it, so it won't light. And ideally too, and this is another thing that like if you've grown up like with Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or whatever, and you like learn how to light fires, or you like, you know, have your little thing and you polish stuff on, like smokers kind of don't work that way. The way to describe the way that the best I could come up with is a smoker should burn like an upturned cigarette, right? And you just keep piling more leaves in the top, and it's burning from the bottom up. I don't burn from the top down because that's not the way that
Our has to be underneath.
yeah, that's not the way that the convection goes. And the key is getting, like putting your newspaper in there and getting that smoker hot with that newspaper, and then adding a handful of leaves and puffing, leaving the top open and never shut the top until like I'm ready to start working bees. And I load that in and pack it and get it good and hot. And then if I start running, my smoke's not smoking as much, there's two things that I'll do. I'll either open the top and smoke it with the top open, which is another really key thing, because you'll end up, you suffocate the fire somewhat when you've got the top on. Then I'll get it going and get good like that, or I'll open it up and start throwing some already packed handfuls of leaves in there. Once you get it going, you can continue to do that. And I just keep my bucket of leaves with me in the bee yard, and you know, this isn't smoke like I like it. I'll go grab a bunch, and I have this really rich, creamy, just beautiful smoke that's really like thick smoke, and it's cool and it works great. And you know, as it goes on too, there's like a shake you can do and some other stuff like that to kind of get it going again. But I will say this, if you do get your smoker going and you're having trouble with it and you've got it packed and it's like going out and you really can't get it lit, stop what you're doing, dump it out and start over is really the way to do it. Trying to battle with a smoker that's half lit, and it's just miserable. So, and like I say, I'm really big on using oak leaves. I don't like using wood chips or anything like that. Don't get me wrong, there's like chunks a lot of times of sticks and stuff that end up in there, but wood chips that are great for your smoker, like at home to cook meat in, like nobody cooks meat in a smoker that's like actively billowing smoke. Like if you go to like Flax or Kreitz's or, you know, these places at Lockhart, they've got a fire going that's cold, and that's great for cooking barbecue, but you don't want that in your bee smoker because it's just hot without a lot of actually particulate kind of smoke, you know. And if you get it real hot, it'll start shooting fire out of the end of your smoker. but I just, like I say, I keep packing those leaves and I just use them and I'm like, oh, this is going like I like it. I'll open the top, puff it, get it going again, and then just start adding some more leaves into it, which then over time you get creosote. And with the creosote, I just burn it out with a torch. It works great. You got to burn it and burn it and burn it until the creosote lights on its own and let it just sit there and burn. And then you got to keep hitting it with a torch. And then, no joke, you just tap it and it literally, like I can take it and just go, doop, and all of that crud that you have to scrape and all that, it literally will fall out of the smoker, like with a tap. I mean, you got to let it cool down. You burn your finger really bad, but it's beautiful. And then the lid closes again and like all that stuff that like, you fight with, or you're like, get the lid closed because it's got crud in it. I mean, in a pinch, if you're just in the yard and you got to get something done, you can scrape it out with your hive tool. But like over time, I find that I just end up going in with the propane torch. But I'm not a fan of lighting the smoker with a torch. I think that's just, I mean, you could do it, don't get me wrong, but typically I just have matches with me and I just light with a match, just one match, and get it going with the newspaper, and then start piling in the oak leaves.
My friend gave me an electrode lighter.
Yeah?
It's two little prongs that stick up and like, different kind of electrodes.
Yeah?
So it stays, if you push the button and you've got this spark going and the wind won't put it out.
That's cool.
I love it.
One time I was stuck in the,
It's an electric lighter and you plug it in and charge it with USB port.
that's cool.
Awesome.
Camping,
Stays,
camping starts selling.
you can have it for
Yeah.
I get it on Amazon. for
That's
$3 or
cool.
$4. Not any more expensive than a little heating.
One time I was out at like one of my out yards and I like didn't like my last of my matches were like wet or something happened. I forget, I didn't have them. And no joke, at the time I had a diesel truck and I marked one of the big batteries. I was like, it worked, but it was kind of like, okay, that's a little weird. But yeah, like, because there's huge batteries in a diesel with a big dually. And I was like, I got it to, yeah. Yeah, it was a little wild. The things you do, like beekeeping is just half MacGyvering everything anyway. I mean, anybody told you different. Like, it's just kind of
One question, once you split the hive and you have installed a new queen, what about the original hive with the main queen? Find her and kill her?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to I would take her out first, either kill her or remove her some kind of way, and then let them sit overnight. And then I would introduce the new queen the next day in just the cage, completely contained. I don't open her up. And then I let her sit in the cage overnight, and then I check for acceptance that next day. So it's like, that's, I guess, what, two days down the road from taking out the queen?
Now, but the bees, the original queen will be in the split hive though, won't she?
No, I take her out. Yeah, but typically when you're doing a split like that, especially with aggressive bees, it's very, very hard to find the queen. That way, splitting it down to these are basically on milk in either one of these. It's 5 frames or 4 frames if you're 8-frame equipment in each one of these. The rest of the frames aren't drawn out; they're just bare foundation, or foundationless if you're foundationless. So. Yeah, before you're going to re-queen, you've got to take the old queen out, because otherwise they're just going to try to fight, and more than likely the other bees then won't accept that new queen, and you're going to come in and find a dead queen in the cage. Yes, sir.
Do you leave attendants in your queen cage?
I do, and it didn't seem. Some people let them out. I left them in there, and it was fine. So I tend to leave them in there now. Like I did that. I used to take them out, and now I'm like, it didn't seem to really affect anything. So. But the key being that really, I think the key to success, and Jimmy probably helped me out with this one, is really that queenless period, to let them know they don't have a queen, and then give them a queen. Just at the amount of time, right? Her pheromone drops, they know she's gone, they're going, oh my gosh, we better make a queen really quick, let's make some queen cells. And they're trying to make emergency queen cells, and they're kind of freaking out. The old queen's pheromones are kind of dissipated and gone. And then you go, oh, by the way, I've got a queen here. And you kind of add her in there. But if you go too long, then they're already going to kind of, I don't know how to put this into other words. It seems like they kind of mentally then invest into those queen cells more than they are of your queen. And they're kind of more like, nah, we got queen cells cooking. We don't need this nonsense that you just introduced into the hive. We don't care. So it's that overnight without a queen, then adding in the queen the next day, but keeping her in the cage just so they don't attack her right off the bat. Or if they do, it kind of, her pheromones get a chance to dissipate some, and then get.
If you're gonna pay $35, $40 for queen, invest the time.
Yes, absolutely. That's excellent statement. And Jimmy Oakley just said that if you're going to spend $30 to $40, some of the queens I was spending like $45 on, they're expensive. Make sure you have the time to do that process, to take the queen out, let them sit overnight, then put the queen in the next day, completely caged, then come back today and then check for acceptance and then release her after she's been accepted. Just trying to shove her in there, poking a hole in the candy and throwing her, you're kind of rolling the dice.
Even when we were raising queens, we would take the queen out and then we leave it 24 hours queenless before we come back to trim themselves.
Did you actually wait like a full 24 hours or did you just like do like an overnight kind of thing?
About the same time
Okay.
next day.
Okay, good to know. Because I was doing it roughly 24 hours. Like if you're a little early, I mean, you don't want to like do it right at sunset and then come there at 6 o'clock in the morning when the sun's coming up and try to do it. Let them have close to 24 hours. One other weird thing that I tried this last go around with queens that actually worked really well. I don't know if any of y'all have done this. I got the queens and I was like, well, I don't know, because it was queens for 2 separate yards that I was requeening. And I knew that, I was going to have to make it out to these yards and stuff. And I went, and I have an egg incubator for chickens. And I was like, well, this thing's adjustable temperature. And the inside of a hive, I could never remember the number. What is it? 96 degrees, 95? I was like, I could set this thing at like 90 degrees and it's got good humidity so they won't dry out because it has a humidity thing and a humidity monitor on the top. I put those queens in that on the thing. I took the egg turner out, obviously, because I don't want to spinning around in there. But I put them in there and put water in there. The humidity, they did great. I don't know if it was just because they were good queens or what, but I think from now on, I'm going to keep them in the incubator because it keeps them like, sure, queens can do okay just sitting in like a warm room at your house, but like that keeps them at like almost like hive temperature, keeps a good humidity in this so they don't dry out. And then every day I would go in there and I would wash my hands really good. And I would take a little glass of water and dip my finger in there and dip in each one of them. Not on the candy side. I can't stress this enough. Don't put it on the candy side. If you do that, the candy will get wet and then it'll run everywhere and the bees will get candy all over and they get sticky. You do it on the opposite end and just literally 1 drop of water where it kind of hangs in the mesh of the cage. And that way they get a chance to drink if they need to. And they did great. I mean, I'm not kidding. I did not lose a single, I don't think I lost a single even attendant. Died during that whole process. And those queens, from the time that I got them, I picked them. They were Weaver queens that they dropped off at 2 Hives Honey in Austin. And I went and picked them up, and it was some of the queens were a full week, over a week before I was able to get them into hives, and they all did fine. And I didn't lose any attendance. Nobody died. So if you have one of those chicken incubators, or you're like on the fence and you got chickens, you're like, I kind of would like buy one and use it for that. As long as you can monitor the humidity and the temperature, it seemed to do great. Like I say, I mean, maybe was it overkill? Sure, but it was kind of cool. And in the future, I definitely would do it too, especially if you're like me. Like I like to sleep where it's cold, and 68 degrees on bees is just not that great when they don't have like a whole colony to like keep them warm. Yes.
When you hold your mother into this new box, what can you do to keep them from that scum? I did 3 splits, and one of them, they went in, they punctured every cat brood. 3 frames. I mean, they wiped everything out with all the honey and pollen, and they were gone inside of 20.
I apologize. There's one big thing that I didn't tell everybody about the splits. My goodness, put entrance reducers in both of them. Really, like entrance reduce them down because if you have other strong colonies in your yard and they get wind that everything ain't right in this, they might decide to just roll in there and rob the whole thing out. Especially if it's a bad time of year.
Robbers go in and they make a mess all over the box. And what I was doing was using 5-frame nuke boxes.
Yeah.
Putting 3 frames into it. Well, I had 1 to maybe 2 frames of brood with 1 frame of honey with a drawn comb and then a feed.
Yeah.
And
it sounds like those sound like if that's all that you've got in there, it might be that they were kind of weak splits that they couldn't defend themselves against the other one. I mean,
The robbers would go
yeah.
in and puncture all the cabins.
Yes. And in fact, one of the ones that I did, that I recently split, I was in a hurry and was just kind of rushing. I didn't do the thing where I brushed them all off. And when I got them back to the yard, because I moved them to an entirely different yard, the ones that I brought there, they didn't have very many bees in there. I mean, it was like, like if they would have been a swarm, they would have probably been about as big as my 2 fists. There wasn't very many bees in there. They accepted the queen just fine. Everything was cool. But then I came back the other day and I noticed there's a lot more activity, and they just got robbed out and they were gone. So it's making sure, more than likely, the split, you're trying to split too thin. I would go thicker. In fact, less.
I use your screen trick and block the entrance, and they've got a little hole.
Oh, well, no, don't block it with screen. I would block it with actually something solid, because what'll happen is the robbers can, if you've got just screen, they can probably still smell what's going on in there, and they might try to get in there. I like making it solid. I'll use sticks, or the actual commercially made.
How long does it take to tell the difference between robbing behavior and the new bees learning how to fly? I mean, there's no fighting that I would know.
Funny that you asked that, because I literally almost made a video about that today, because I watched my line, because I did a split in 1 yard and I took all the splits back to my home yard where I live, because again, doing all this queen and adding and going, I didn't want to have to drive a Taylor every day from Georgetown. I was like, I don't want to have to do that. I want to do this all from my backyard, essentially. I mean, I live in the country. I don't really have a backyard per se, but so I almost made a video about this today, and this is the kicker. This is how I knew something was up. I looked at this line of new splits that I got. Every single one of them, they all have the same amount of activity at the entrance, right? They're all bustling, they're coming and going, they're moving back. There's no fighting, there's nothing like that. They're bustling and going. The key that I knew that this one, something had failed. One, I knew that there wasn't that many bees in that one, but what I could tell, I'm like, oh, well, maybe they're good. They've got a lot of activity. The key, every single one of the other ones, I saw bees going in with pollen, not that one. There's no bees going in that one with pollen at all. And I sat there and watched, none. The other kicker was there was a fine amount of cappings that you could see. It looked like little dirt almost, little dust. Yeah, that was out the front, out that little entrance. Yeah, it was out the front. So, because they were going in there and they're tearing up the cappings, and they pretty much cleaned it out now. In fact, that's going to be my to-do list, is to go and then take those frames, because they're drawn good frames, and put them in the other splits that I make that have foundationless and that have, not drawn foundation, because I can at least reuse those. They're still good, but no, they cleaned that one out. So what I would say is that probably that's the key, is that the splits that you're making are too weak. And in fact, Les Crowder, the Top Bar Hive Bag book, he does this type of split. Granted, it's with top bars, but there's nothing stopping you from doing it with Langstroth. He does what he calls a 2-3 split. He splits 2 colonies into 3 and makes these really strong splits out of the other ones. So I think that would probably be it. Just one frame of brood and or 2 frames of brood and 1 frame of honey. I would probably at a minimum go with at least 4. With at least 1 good frame of brood and then some frames of honey, so that they've got some stores while they're figuring out everything. And then again, reduce your entrances down to nothing. I mean, that, the way you have the flippable little entrance reducers, the little tiny one, that's what I've got them all set at, because they'll be fine with that even if it's hot outside. I'm not a fan at all of screen bottom boards. I don't like them. And in fact, Chris Barnes, the guy that puts on the Brazos Valley, or one of the big, that puts the Brazos Valley Beekeepers on, he won't even sell nooks to people anymore that have screen bottom boards, because he's they have sconce so much that, because they have trouble regulating their brood temperature, both warm and cool. So I would say reduce your entrances, and then try next time you do splits to do are you 10 frame equipment or 8 frame? 10 frame. You're doing 10 frame. I would go full.
I have tried to re-queen some nukes that I bought this year, because I just wasn't happy. I mean, they were duds.
Right.
So I was trying to re-queen them, but when I took the queen out, first off, I was impressed because I found them.
Yeah.
Probably the first time in 3 years I've seen queens looking for them. killer.
Right.
And I didn't have a whole lot of resources to take out. So that's why I
Okay.
had one or two brand, and they were spotty fruit patterns. to begin with.
Yeah, see that's
But I had two, and they're sitting
Yeah.
side by side, and one of them was trying, and the other one just took off. That was the only thing I could see.
yeah,
There's no mess on the bottom, but it didn't look like they got rocked out.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it could be speed too, that like, depending on the way that got split, if the bees that you got in that other colony were mainly field force workers, they'll just fly back to the other colony. They know that is home. I had that happen to me, and I did a split again. I was like rushing. I wasn't going through the full thing. And it seems like every time I try to cut corners, I get burned. I think I've learned my lesson.
When
Personally,
I
but
pull
what-
them out of that one, I shake them back into that box, because normally the nurse bees don't shake off.
Okay,
Or will, because they're walking around.
right.
I think, so we're gonna if you guys wanna just keep on talking
Yeah.
after, we do a door prize, or a drawing, so we have 5 numbers, so if you just wanna check your tickets. And I do not have my glasses. Here. Somebody has glasses.
Who's got young eyes? Who can read?
I know. Well, I have my glasses.
Get Brandon to look at it.
I was gonna say, I did one of my splits. I came back the
Yeah,
next
just
day,
the last 3 numbers.
and then one box was completely
4,
empty, and the other one had all the bees in it. You know what I did?
Okay, so.
Switched them.
Yeah, you can
I
just
took
take
care
your
of it.
ticket back.
Yeah, all I had to do is pick one up, put it in the place they put the other one in, it was fine, because the field force will go back to that one, and the other one kept on the clean.
Okay, there.
We have somebody, she has.
Okay.
Yeah.
4, 4, 2.
Somebody at 442?
Yeah.
Okay, and then 452?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's 4.
Ah, there you go. One more.
Oh, okay, and then 450. So Brandon, thank you so much.
Oh,
for
absolutely.
coming.
Thank you for having me. And I mean, I hope I helped just kind of throwing out weird little stuff, because like, I really, the more I do beekeeping, the more I realize that it's just this like big collection of these like little weird ad hoc solutions to problems that are kind of all duct taped together. There's no, I'm trying to get this quote going, but the only formulas in beekeeping are for making feed, and that's it. Like everything else is just like, you got to kind of figure it out on the fly. I mean, it really is, because that's the nature of it. So thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah.